Some shocking or not so shocking news happened this past week, depending upon your interest when it comes to strategy guides, with the announcement of the closure of Prima Games. Prima being, or was, the last remaining maker of strategy guides for the game industry, and they have been around for a very long time. And with their closing, kind of marks the end of an era, with the game industry making use of printed strategy guides. And I am certainly a fan of them, with a few around here, including of course my double jump guides, which if I tape all these together, I could use this as a weapon to beat people up, or I could lift some weights with these as well. But the use of strategy guides, player's guides, however you want to call them, have been around since very much the beginnings of the game industry. I have Nintendo guides for Final Fantasy 1. I want to say I have one for Super Mario Bros. 3 somewhere, I'm not sure. And of course, many others. And over the course of the 90s, multiple companies tried to get in on making these guides because it was good money. Games were very hard, and there was no such thing as the internet or YouTube to find out how to get past a boss, or figure out a secret to a level. And this certainly created a market for it. With that said, though, back then, without any other competition, most strategy guides were very basic. How do I beat a level? Show me a map. Give me like a screenshot of do this, this, and this on a boss, and you're good. And not much else to it. They were great to have, and they are useful from a historical standpoint, but in terms of actually giving value to the games, it really wasn't there. Now, with the exception of that, we had companies like Double Jump Books for a time who made probably some of the most all-encompassing guides I've ever seen. I think they were eventually bought out by Prima. But these guides give you everything and anything you could ever ask about these games, from maps to boss guides to pathing to backstory to costumes, art, you name it. Basically, this is just like a miniature game bible of how to play this game. And those kinds of guides are always fascinating me when the companies go that extra mile. Double Jump even got interviews with the developers from the company to end these things on. And they also went further by providing min-maxing guides for people who wanted to know more, especially in their Disgaea and the Nippon Ichi guides, which kind of started their route to success during the, I think, early to mid-thousands. But nevertheless, though, strategy guides have died. And it's an industry that it kind of is a good analogy to the old, video killed the radio star from that old song there. And the idea that as the game industry moved and evolved, and so as being able to communicate about games, strategy guides kind of disappeared. Prima, of course, bought out most of their competitors due to the, again, sagging sales, and they became the only game in town. And that worked for them for quite a while. But it still goes without saying that eventually it was just pretty much a downward turn, and they were going to go away eventually. But as the thumbnail for today goes, it does raise a very interesting question. Could we have saved strategy guides? Could there have been more information to go through than what was currently available? Now, before we get to some video footage, let's talk about the problems, the inherent issues with strategy guides first, and then we'll try to bounce some solutions. The big thing about strategy guides today than they were 15 to 20 years ago is the evolution of video games. Again, during the early thousands before then, most video games were not heavily updated outside of MMOs. And most MMOs did get strategy guides built into each expansion. I know World of Warcraft has had several releases. But for the most part, the game you buy on day 1 is the same as the game you buy, day 301. That is not the case today, with many games getting additional DLC, more content, more characters, even patches that will balance or rebalance certain characters and aspects of the game. Just imagine trying to write a player's guide or strategy guide for Team Fortress 2. Pretty much within 2 months, it would no longer be relevant due to the number of items that gets added into that game. Another problem, of course, is, well, right here with the growth of video-based content. And again, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1,000 pictures. You can show something off very easily through video than you would through text. Now, not everything works like that, and that will come up in our second part. But for people looking for very simple information or very simple answers, YouTube is just a click away. And again, why would you need to buy a strategy guide or even visit a forum like GameFAQs? And I know there are several other ones out there as well. But with that said, though, let's turn to some footage of a game that definitely is one for needing a strategy guide for to get the most out of it. And let's see if we can bounce some ideas as to how we could have changed things for the better. But first, a quick word to our Patreon supporters. And now a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. At this point, considering that I've held up double jump guides, you should have expected more Disgaea 5 footage. But Disgaea as a franchise really worked itself as a good example of why strategy guides can help a game out. So much of what goes into playing these games involves understanding the systems that are underlining the abstraction and the design. And you really can't talk about raw numbers like that in a video, unless you want to just make like a very, I guess, droll kind of design. And again, watching footage of someone playing Disgaea 5, and even just talking about it, it doesn't really explain well what it is that's happening. And I'm sure for the people watching this part right now who have played Disgaea, you probably know everything that I'm doing in terms of strategies of healing, like I'm doing here, to attack damage types, and so on. But trying to explain to someone the depth that goes into these subsystems, you can't really do that in a video format, because so much of it is about describing things that the player will never really see impact the game. You can watch someone swing an axe right there or shoot their gun, but it doesn't really explain about the importance or the stats relating to stuff like managers and professionals, which again, if you're a Disgaea fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. And this is where I think some of the opportunities, or one part of them, for keeping strategy guides going could have come from, is making them for very number-heavy kind of designs. Another thing would be games that do rely a lot on multiple systems. I could imagine some very interesting guides being written about explaining to someone how to play a game like Crusader Kings, Dominions, Stellaris, and even smaller games, or quote-unquote smaller games like Civilization. I know a game designer and I think critic, Bruce Garrick, he once made a strategy guide for Dominions 2, and that was the only way I managed to even play that game for like 10 minutes. So there are definitely games out there that do warrant, I think, strategy guides along that line. Now, another point I think that is kind of missing, and this is I think one of the complaints I've had about Prima for such a long time, was the general lack of quality of their guides. In the sense that you buy them, it's on very cheaply made paper, again, very basic descriptions, there's no real greater thought or insight put into these games that are put into the guides. This is why I think it was Bradley for a time were kind of Prima's #1 competitor. They featured fully hardbound guides, they usually had interviews, unique and original art. It was something that you could properly display, it almost was like a coffee table book in that regard. And with Double Jump, while they didn't go for like that kind of overall aesthetic, they went for just pure raw information. Again, you read a strategy guide from cover to cover of a Disgaea game, you will learn everything that you've ever wanted to know about that game and how to play it through reading those guides. And I think for me, like in my opinion, what could have saved strategy guides, or at least make them continue to be relevant, would have been to push that angle. Give me information and stuff that I can't get from YouTube. Again, 100 different YouTubers can make the same video of how to beat a character in Shovel Knight. But how many people would have gotten the chance to interview Yacht Club Games and have unique descriptions and discussions about how these characters came to be? And that kind of information right there is timeless. And I think that's kind of our main point for today's video, is that the best guides, the ones that provide information and detail that you can't get anywhere else, have a sense of timelessness to them. Again, if you try and make a straight guide for Team Fortress, Payday, World of Warcraft, or even something like Hearthstone or Gwent, that information stops working within a few weeks of it being released. But if you have a guide that has information, interviews from the developers, stuff that you would not get anywhere else, it would retain its value a lot longer. And of course, with that said, we have to talk about the collector's editions of guides. Because companies like Bradley, Double Jump, and even Prima, as they got like in the last few years, did go this route. You had your standard guide, and then you had something that was a lot more impressive looking. It was hardcover. It had more art. It was something, again, that you could properly display. And it was on par with some of the very high quality art books we get from some developers, like CD Projekt Red, Blizzard, and even that Oddworld book that I showed you guys in a older video. But the point is, the only way for strategy guides to have remained relevant and to stay popular would have been they had to evolve. And beyond just talking about game information that everybody can do. It's a great analogy. I hate to toot my own horn here, but what I do here with Game Wisdom compared to other gaming channels. That anybody and their brother can make a video about why Super Mario Odyssey is a great game, or how to get past Ludwig in Bloodborne. But talking about the design, about random patterns, and being able to create progression systems, that kind of stuff doesn't go away. And more importantly, it's not something that's easily copied. And the problem that strategy guides ran into was that the only real reason to read the majority of them was being done by everybody else for literally free, or for pennies a day in terms of ad revenue. And as we all know from the consumers, they want the path of least resistance. Why should I go to the store and spend $30 on your strategy guide when some YouTuber has the exact answer I need in a 3-minute long video, or just fast forward through their live stream? And that is a big part of why the strategy guide market just could not adapt to things. And the sad part is that even with a company like Double Jump, who again made some of the highest quality strategy guides I've ever seen, they still went out. And that was kind of that big point. They kind of remind me of the company from the 90s whose name completely escapes me right now, and it hurts me that I can't remember them. They publish games like Elemental Gearbolt, a Sundra series. They went very high quality with their CD packaging and their manuals. And the problem was they were putting in all this money into a product that was just not bringing it back. And sadly, I think that was the other issue with strategy guides. Like I said, it's very easy to put a video together. It's another matter entirely to make a 300, 400 paper-bound guide that you're going to have to ship out and get to stores and to consumers. But with that said, we're going to wrap up this industry insight here, because it's depressing me more and more I talk about this. So, for those of you watching right now, can you think of any other ways you think could have saved strategy guides, whether through a reinvention or evolving what's there already? Let me know in the comments below, but thanks for watching. If you'd like to get added to our Patreon thank you page, check out patreon.com/JoshBycer and come back for more discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. If you're looking for another book about game design, be sure to check out my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, out now. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.